Welcome once again to Syntax Error, your pretentious, philosophical, pedantic podcast ostensibly about video gaming and related topics therein. Warning, this podcast contains mature language, content, and spoilers. You have been warned. Hello, and welcome back to Syntax Error. I, of course, am Scott Thurlow, as always, joined, as occasionally, by Jane Manzer.
Hello.
And Stephen Amosi.
Hello.
And tonight we'll be discussing difficulty levels in games, sort of the origins of it, sort of an arc of how they evolved, and how we each approach them or may ignore them, as the case may be. So let's start off with one of the most famous things known in games is that if not a trope, a term called Nintendo Hard, which is to say, old school games didn't really have adjustable difficulty levels. They had what they had, or fuck off and don't play this game. And if you found it very difficult, then you'd probably doing the latter action. But I think Azian was sort of brought up a bit precast that it's sort of an artifact of the arcade style, the arcade mindset, where it's all about scores. So,
well, not only is it all about scores, but if you want to go cynically here, it's all about making money.
Yes,
you want
of
your
course.
Players to die, so they keep putting in, and you want to have. Actually, I feel that a lot of the great intent that went into creating a game like that is to have a real balance system.
A cycle, yeah.
You're not feeling that your game's impossible to beat, but it's just winnable enough so you want to put in another quarter so you can beat the next level.
Right. One of my best and worst experiences with that is probably playing the X-Men arcade game. Mm-hmm. If you guys remember that, I'm sure everyone of our age remembers that arcade game. And like, that was a game that you would just go to, like, you'd be at the movie theater or wherever, and it would be there, and you would just pour quarters into it. And like, of all the games that I convinced, when I was younger, like, preteen/teenager, of all the games that I convinced my parents to give me a bunch of money for, that was probably the one that I convinced them to give me the most for. Right. I must have looked like a crack fiend coming up to them and like just saying, "I need more quarters. Just give me more quarters." Just completely, irresponsible amounts of quarters poured into that machine.
You would have probably been better off if you were a crack fiend.
Yes, I would have spent less money, I think.
We're all products of New Jersey here, and I remember growing up going down to the boardwalk in New Jersey.
Yep, same thing.
And I would assume $20 in the early 90s to play for the entire night. And that's, I guess, more than the $20 worth this day and age. But I would go through the entire thing, whether it was pinball, which I absolutely loved, and or I remember like Time Crisis back in the day.
Time Crisis is a classic. We'll talk about that for sure. But no, it's legit. Yep.
Yeah, like a lot of those games. Time Crisis was another good one, Yeah,
you were saying like movie theater games. I think both of those are like prevalent, at least in our use. Sure.
Well, I remember Time Crisis being one of the last like big arcade games that I remember playing. Like I would go like in high school, and we would go watch a movie or whatever, and then I would, before or after the movie, we would play Time Crisis, and I would just spend that and Gauntlet.
Yep,
was another big one where like I just pour quarters into it, and like, so the idea of a difficulty level in those games is kind of non-existent. It was kind of just just like, this is hard. The reason that it's hard is because we want you to put as much money into this machine as you possibly
It was built into design, but I mean, yes, that's true, of course. But I like what you said. I believe is that it's not like it's impossible. It wants you to, any game that's doing something like that in terms of difficulty levels, it wants you to believe, like, if you were just better enough, if you just knew the level just a little bit better, if you could just do the one move when you exactly need to do it, then you would feel as if I could get over the next, do the next thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's all about.
And it's sort of a psychological thing. It fed into that, but it's effective, of course, because at least if you're into it, it's going to get you. And you're like, hey, Mom, Dad, give me one more quarter, one more playthrough, and I can do it. I can make it. Sure. So I think that's sort of the origin of it, right? As it translated to home consoles, then very few games. I'm trying to think of anything I can remember like offhand that allowed you to in fact choose a difficulty level that had anything beyond whatever it was, in the main game itself.
Well, there were very early games that had it. I believe Wolfenstein had it, and
Yeah.
like Doom.
Yeah, some of the, you're right. Some
Doom
of the
had
PC
5
games.
difficulty levels,
Right.
which was pretty crazy for the time. And
Were
like,
they the first ones? Real quickly, was Doom the first game to have a nightmare mode? I think that's true, but I
Doom
don't know
might
for
be.
sure.
I don't know what other games have had a nightmare mode.
No, many have. I'm saying.
I mean, they've had. Well, I guess maybe the only one that's called it Nightmare.
no, there's
perhaps, but-
others.
Okay,
All I'm saying is that it's the first one that has like, you think this game is
Yes.
hard, like
That's-
normally. Yeah.
that's definitely a Doom thing.
Well, I remember there was I don't know if it was NES or SNES, but a Ninja Gaiden game. I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
had
Yep,
a
you're right.
very famous difficulty, like selection there.
Yeah.
I think if you died enough, it would knock down the difficulty.
And that's
of
also
that.
kind of a thing too. Like it's sort of reversing. Like, you're not doing so well. Maybe you should select, bump it down or something.
Yeah,
But like, that's funny. Like, yeah, some games had that. But you're right. The Ninja Gaiden thing is a good point. I believe that is correct, and it was infamous for having that. Yes.
But a lot of the early like NES games didn't have much content to them, so in a similar
exactly.
sense of where they're not getting quarters after quarters, it was difficult just to pad it out and make you feel like you're getting your money's worth in a game.
right.
No, you're
those
right.
those
Exactly.
games had one difficulty, and it was hard as shit. Like a lot of
Yeah,
them.
for the
you know?
most part, for sure.
Yeah.
But you're right. But it goes to what we were saying, that, yeah, because just the limitations of technology at that time, they want to try to give you, like, extract as much as you can. So therefore, there's like only maybe 5 levels to this game, but getting past level 3 or so is, nigh impossible unless you've poured enough hours into this game to know exactly what to do and when and how to do it.
But also, you have I was a huge RPG fan back in the day, and of course, those don't have difficulty levels.
Right.
But there was so much grinding involved to
That's true.
power yourself up.
Kind of made
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how much actual content would be in most of those
if you
games.
cut out the grinding.
If you cut out all
Mhm.
the battles that were involved.
No, that's a good point. Sure, like you're right. Like in general, to extend the life of a game, if you will, to get your going back to our very, very first episode ever of Syntax, to get your value out of it. I mean, it's a legitimate thing, surely still valid. That they're sort of like barriers, like you had to get over walls they would sort of artificially create for you. But that meant that the difficulty level, if not adjustable, was still there, like it built into the game itself.
Yeah, and the best games knew how to balance that
Exactly.
pretty well, and the worst games were just impossible from like level 1. You
Yeah.
know, like
They were just badly
remember-
designed, or
I remember
like
playing-
dickishly designed, if you
yeah,
will.
I remember playing like Bart versus the Space Mutants, and like that game was so goddamn impossible, and like it was hard from the first level.
Sure.
Yes, it was. I forgot all
Yeah.
about that game until you,
Until you
brought
mentioned
up.
it, me too.
Mother
But
of
yeah.
God, that
It
was
was so
Yeah,
bad.
it was just the middle
I
finger
never
in
beat
your
the
face.
second level of that game. Like
Sure.
I got to the second level, and that was it. I couldn't get past it.
Yeah, and that's just badly implemented. Like,
Yeah.
fake difficulty, I
At least,
believe, is also
at least
a trope.
you
But
know the original Ninja Turtles game, you could get past a few levels before it became like mind-numbingly
Sure.
impossible.
Actually, I just saw something interesting. That although we were talking about like game difficulty, one of the big things in our youth were like game genies
Mhm.
Yep.
and like cheat codes.
I
and
definitely
things
had
like
one.
that.
Yeah,
So in a sense, it was we understand that you can't we're very difficult. So pay a little bit extra for this item, and we'll allow you to have
to see
some
more
perks
content
off
or
of it.
something. Yeah,
But there were even like built-in cheat codes built into the games.
sure.
even
Like the
before
Contra
that.
code, and all that. Sure.
Contra Code was a big one. Doom had a bunch of them
Yep,
even
yep,
before
that's
that.
right.
You know, like
Yep.
that was a big thing. Like once I learned all the built-in cheat codes for Doom, I used the crap out of them. And like I never actually beat Doom until 3 or 4 years ago. But, like I beat the hell out of that game just
Sure.
by cheating my way through it when I was a kid for sure.
Sure.
Just like everything in life.
Yes.
Yeah,
Of course.
well, that's my MO.
And that can be fun too. But you just brought up Turtles before, so not that one, but Turtles in Time, as I was a bit talking to you guys about again precast. That was an SNES game, and I played the crap out of that game, and it had. In fact, what was I believe is the first game, at least I remember / encountered, that had a selectable difficulty level where it was normal and hard. So I beat it on normal a couple of times, and maybe it is a personal thing to me, but when I was a kid, I was like, oh, hard is for people who are much better than me at games. I shouldn't try hard. But eventually I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm
Yeah.
going to try hard.
Put on your big boy pants.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. Like, how will I ever know, like, to compare myself to? So I went through it, and yeah, it was, as I recall, the big thing is some of the enemies would be replaced by harder enemies. So you go through
Yeah.
level 2,
Yeah.
like harder core guys would show up first, like stuff like that. So it was the same. Like you've gone through it, you sort of know what's happening, but you didn't expect, or you were forced to deal with hardcore shit earlier on.
Well, speaking of Ninja Turtles, the original NES one was a nightmare as well.
Yeah.
I'm talking about difficulty.
True, that's what
levels
I'm
there.
saying. Yeah,
But
I think it was a nightmare because of design and not necessarily
yeah,
difficulty,
that
but
dam
it's-
level was
Yeah.
was nigh impossible. I agree.
But I love Turtles now. But I want to go a little bit farther into
Okay.
the history as it started. Like you had, in a sense, I feel the next kind of iteration was both. You have things like the lost levels from Super Mario Brothers,
Right.
Mhm.
which
Good point,
were
yeah.
harder versions of, and I believe that in a sense it came out as like Mario Brothers 2 for.
I was
Japan.
actually going to
Yep.
mention Super Mario Brothers because if I recall correctly, after you beat the game, you got like a harder version of the game.
I believe
the second
that is
run
correct.
through.
Yes, I also recall that.
But I like the Resident Evils, for instance, started doing
Yeah.
like second playthroughs that
Mhm.
were harder.
Yeah.
I don't know how many had back in those days that difficulty switch, but a lot of them like
It was
I've
built
noticed
in
being built
either way,
in.
yeah.
You
You're right about that.
play through once and then you got the harder challenge after it.
Right. So if not having a necessarily like slider per se or selector, it was still like somehow built into the design of the game, which yes was a bit more organic, but it would give you a challenge. Like you're right, like the Res Evil stuff, as I recall, we talked a bit about it on the Res Evil 20th anniversary app. But A and B, like Claire A, Claire B, Leon A, like it was different. So you were familiar with enough with it, but again, it threw some change ups at you
Mhm.
without necessarily being it's a in quotes harder version.
I think this will be clearer when we talk about actual difficulty later, but I like that kind better because they familiarize yourself with the rules of the world.
Yes.
You understand how to play the game. You've had the experience, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, you want more of a challenge? Well, you're reusing the same sets, but here you go. It's gonna be tougher. this
Enemy
time.
X shows up here,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
No, you're right about that, and it's this is really interesting that I didn't really think about it until until games came into the modern age, if you will. That as we'll shortly get into, that now you can have like 5-6 difficulty levels, and yeah, you're right, Steve-O. As you said, Doom sort of did that, Wolfenstein as well,
Mm-hmm.
but it was sort of few and far between until it seemed like that was something expected, that you could then have your choice of whatever,
Yeah.
and it would change your experience, but the core of it was still there. It just depended how much or not, how much pride I guess you wanted to throw into it.
And I would like to briefly point out that there's a small movement, I suppose, but that kind of movement towards if you finish a game, you can play it again.
the New Game
the
Plus
harder
kind of
level.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like New Game Plus is making a comeback.
Yep.
Most notably, I think in like the Dark Souls
Souls
games
stuff,
and
sure.
yeah, and Bloodborne.
But certainly other games have done that too, and I think you're right. Like that's sort of a throwback. Some of the RPGs, as we were speaking about, Chrono Trigger had a New Game Plus mode,
Mhm.
but you could like the reason to do that was to unlock like 10 more endings and so forth.
Right.
So games like it was sort of around that era that you see it sort of creeping into game design.
Well, I think that in a sense, first-person shooters have the easiest transition
Yes,
into.
I think that's absolutely
making
correct.
and that's why you see Doom and Wolfenstein be the first ones, because all you need to do is up the hit points and
Right,
enemy
exactly.
has, and maybe remove some of the ammo that
Yeah.
you get,
Yeah.
or add a few more enemies here
Up
and
the hit
there.
points,
It's sort of-
up the damage that they
It's
do
sort of
with their
easy
attacks.
to code that, to program it
Mm.
into the game. It lends itself to that. I think that's
Yeah.
absolutely true.
And that's why I was a big Call of Duty fan back in the day. Call of Duty 2 and upwards.
Mm.
I remember they did it very well. They made it like
It was
so
reasonable.
challenging that it offered like the veteran modes back in 2
back
and
in those
3
days, yeah.
really made it feel like I was winning a war like by the
Sure.
time I beat it.
Yeah.
But then I remember when World at War came around, it was notorious for its difficult level was the enemies would just spam grenades at you.
Mm.
Yeah, see, and
And-
that's horrible. Like you're right. It certainly there's a balance, and when done well, for sure, it can make you feel as if you're accomplishing something rather than just like buffing out the AI to a ludicrous degree.
I would like to posit that perhaps there is a different way to bump up the difficulty level. And I'm trying
Oh, yeah?
to think of like games that may have done something different other than just adding hit points to the enemies or adding like damage that they do. or like
It's a good,
like
I'm trying to
making
think of it
like
as well,
for
now that you mention it.
I think it'd be cool like for a puzzle game, like somehow making the puzzles more difficult, or like stuff like that. I can't think of any games that have really done that.
I think I know of a few, but I just can't think of them.
Yeah, it escapes me.
Yeah.
Certainly, there are probably cases that happened.
But I think that would be cool. I mean, honestly, it would take a lot more work to do it as a developer. But I think that would be cool to like kind of bump the difficulty in that way.
Sure, that's the thing.
Getting a little creative about it.
So that makes me think. Like, imagine if Portal had difficulty sliders. Like,
Right.
how would that change the game?
Right.
I think
What would you
sort of-
do to make it more
that's
difficult?
sort of what you're getting at. But you're right. Of course, from a design and development standpoint, it's a lot easier just to if your hard mode times X is to have enemies have 125% health and you have 75% or whatever. Like, it just changes that.
Well, the Fallout games were and the Elder Scrolls games were notorious for this, because it would actually break my immersion to a game.
It breaks roleplay for
when this character just won't die. Like, yeah, occasionally it's fun to face an enemy that is much more powerful and have to be intelligent about beating him.
Right.
But occasionally you also I'm facing a raider who's wearing basically a loincloth, and he's taking
He's
like
eating up slugs, magnum
500
slugs
shotgun
in the face.
heads. Yeah, so.
Sure. I mean, that's correct. I agree with that, and we sort of touched upon it. But yeah, it's goes over the balance line, I guess, of it's nice if you want. If yes, it's a challenge in quotes, but it's diverse. It's divested from like what the setting is supposed to be.
Mhm.
And I agree. Like, I don't like it. I dislike it when that happens. I'll bring another franchise, not the Bethesda stuff, but I think Ubi with Far Cry did a good job. Where it probably was that it was a numbers game at the end of the day, but it wasn't so egregious that it felt unreal.
Yeah.
It's just that they actually sort of diverging from that. Some games will do it in the sense that enemies will die quicker, and so will you. So
Right.
like it's like a one-hit kill on both ways.
Yeah.
So almost like a Hotline Miami thing, which Hotline Miami is probably a good example. There's no difficulty slider. It's either do it or fuck you again. But no, like it's going to be dependent upon how they sort of parse it out, and what the debuffs, I guess, and buffs on the AI are going to be, and how realistic and how much immersion it might break for you.
I guess I feel like in that vein, they balance the game for normal mode.
Yes.
And they don't even bother
theory.
trying to balance it for hard mode. They're like,
Yeah.
all right, if this isn't fair, too bad. It's hard.
What's very interesting, I was playing a while back Diablo 3,
Mhm.
and it had the easy mode is normal mode, and then it gets to hard, and then it gets to like, I think there's 5 levels of torment,
Yeah.
which you
I know it has like a little name to it. Yeah.
which you unlock by beating certain parts of the game.
Yeah.
They also offer permadeath, which is a very interesting.
It changes up
I did,
what you're
because-
gonna do. Sure.
Yeah, because that actually adds a level of tension throughout the entire work, because
Exactly. It's well said.
I had characters die to random creatures just by laying my guard
By
down.
natural fighting. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
And
you have to be on guard at all times in order to. Yeah.
because you never know when all of a sudden mini boss characters running the corner with this certain skill set that will just freeze me and then create this arcane bolt right by where and then my
and then-
life is just draining.
Yeah.
But the permadeath plus their type of hardcore too was the sheer number of enemies, and when you fought mini bosses, their abilities
They're
were
built
ratcheted up
Yeah.
completely.
Mhm.
Sure. Yeah, no, that all makes sense. Like, that's, again, one balance. It could... See, I sort of grew into bumping up difficulty levels, as anyone who's familiar with, like, my gaming style is, because I do want a bit of an extra challenge, but if it becomes such a slog and a chore that, either, as we were saying, breaks immersion and doesn't, no longer applies to whatever world that I'm supposed to be invested in, or B, just doesn't make sense in general, is just frustrating for no reason, then I'm going to bump it back down. I think I spoke about this last season in Dragon Age Inquisition.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to play it on hard. There were 4 modes, I believe, and hard was the third. The third of those tiers. There's a nightmare mode beyond that, which is again egregious to me. But even within that, there were a couple battles when I was like, listen, I could probably do this if I really, really wanted to.
If you
But
take the next 2 days to...
Yeah, I want to get through the next part of the story. Like, I don't want to be grinding anymore, really. So I had to just bump it back down. So I don't know, like, it could, again, it depends how they're going to do it. But when done well, it will be a satisfying challenge, I suppose, and not just a challenge for the sake of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. Well, I guess an important possibly question for everyone is, what game modes do you normally play on? You know, like I'll be the first to say I play on normal mode all the time. Like the way I look at it is that's the version of the game that the creators meant people to play at.
Yeah, no, I get it. Like, and you've said before, and I understand that you just want to get through the story.
That's what I want, and like I don't want it to be super easy. I want it to be challenging, but I also don't want it to be so challenging that it gets annoying to me.
Right? No, exactly, and that's sort of what I just said. But again, as I evolved in my video game life, that I like to think I could take on the challenge. But yes, when it becomes too much, I'll bump it back down.
Yeah.
But I do think it's nice that I salute the developers who at least have it there as an option, if you so choose. If you want to be really hardcore about it, that's fine.
Yeah. Just
that maybe not it always is for me.
Well, you usually play at like the hard difficulty level, right? So if there's an extra hard, you don't play at that one.
If there's 5, I'll play 4 out of 5. If there's 3, I'll play 3. Or if there's 4, I'll play 3 out of 4. Like something like that. Sure. And yeah, for the most part, it's fine. Like, I didn't really I can't think of anything that is egregious to me that I can think of where I had to turn it down, except for the things I just said. But other than that, like, I played, again, Far Cry 3 and 4, played through hard, fine, no problems, really. Like, it was fun to play it that way.
Yeah.
It was, immersion was never broken, as Ian and I were speaking about earlier. Skyrim, like, I played 4 to 5, so hard, not very hard, or whatever Bethesda has. And that was perfectly fine. It was realistic enough, and also a challenge, but never egregious where, like, I just hit a troll in the face like 50 times and didn't die.
Exactly.
I play whatever the trophy requirement.
I was waiting for you to get to that.
Yes. Because I am a huge whore when it comes to... Because I assess my self-worth based on shiny objects on the television that no one else can see.
Which we will all be doing in the future.
Oh, no, we can all see it.
Well,
I just surf your trophies nonstop on PSN.
Oh.
I got a trophy for looking up all the trophies you got.
So...
But sure, no, I get it. Like, and you're right. Like, yes, because that's sort of the gamer you are. If something, oh shit, I have to play it now a nightmare just to get the trophy, you're going to do it, even if it isn't the funnest thing in the world. Mm-hmm. And also now you have to do another third playthrough or whatever.
I played through all 3 of the God of War series.
Oh yeah,
and that's pretty hardcore. I salute you for that, for sure.
The hardest difficulty, but I became very good at them because I had to become more. Would be playing still to this day. So I have another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you take a look at something like Diablo 3, there's no requirement for me to beat it on any difficulty except for a once through on permanent death.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I get better items and unlockables by playing on harder difficulties. Do you support the idea that players who, like in a game, players who play on a higher difficulty deserve to be rewarded?
Yes and no. It's difficult. Like, it's rewarding you for attempting it. Sure. So I guess the question is, could you have gotten those items on a different difficulty level, just not as often, right?
Yeah, I believe it speeds up, it heightens the drop rate.
You get, like, legendary drops more often, right? Sure. I mean, yeah, maybe. Like, the thing is, they sort of have to do that.
But I gotta get the numbers to hit other creatures with the numbers and...
Right, it's a min-maxing thing. Your question is it come down to min-maxing? If I really want to be hardcore min-maxing, should I bump up the difficulty level just for the fact that I will get better drops more often? Maybe if I can handle it. It's personal choice, I would think.
I can see doing that. If there's a reason to get those items, then perhaps it's worth it. But the thing is that if you play at the lower difficulty level, you probably don't need those items to beat the game.
Yeah, it's a loop in a sense.
It really depends. There are games where, like, you're rewarded by getting those items because you can see something cool, or like maybe you can see like an extra thing. A little, like, FMV or something.
No,
I've
seen those that have different endings depending on the difficulty you beat them on.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, there's stuff like that, which is always interesting.
Which is a bit different, but
Honestly, at this point, I will probably play through it on the regular difficulty level and then look up on YouTube the other endings.
Exactly. Like,
but I mean, I really just don't have time to play through games more than once at this point.
Yeah,
but,
and that's kind of the problem. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, even though you and I sort of somewhat differ on our play styles,
right?
At the end of the day, I'll give you an example, and you might speak to it a bit. I really love Metal Gear, Phantom Pain. It was awesome. But there were a couple of things, if I wanted to see like extra little parts of the story and what happened to characters, I would have to slog through a lot of difficult levels, just to unlock that and to see it. And you're right. Like, I'm sorry, I enjoyed that game and I put as many hours as I put into it, but I'm not going to go back and do that.
Now, the question is, if you were younger
and
you didn't have all the resources you have now for getting games, so are you holding them to a double standard now that you enjoyed their difficulty when you were younger, but now that you have things to do, you're kind of a little bit resentful?
I think you're right. Am I being somewhat of a hypocrite? Kind of. But yes, because of the nature of that. When I was a kid, I mean, I did only have a more limited amount of games. There were more limited games being produced. So yes, if there was one game that I really loved and would stick through it, I probably would do multiple playthroughs and play it, unlocking all the stuff that was necessary for doing that.
Like, for instance, we both love Chrono Trigger. If Chrono Trigger came out today with its multiple endings where you had to go do certain things, I know you star-starred all your characters. I star-starred all of mine. Would you say, what a waste of time? I don't have time to go through all of this.
Would I do that today? I'm not sure. You're right. It's a legitimate thing, just based on them, like, growing up, if you will.
I played Chrono Trigger fairly recently, and I did not star all my characters. That's for damn sure.
It's not necessary or anything.
I played it through to the end. I beat the game, and then I looked up the other endings online. And what I was going to say is I don't begrudge any game for doing that. I think it's awesome that they do that, but I'm not the person that's going to, I'm not the demographic for something like that.
Sure.
Like, I'm not the person that's going to go through and play all those games. I'll play through it once. I'll look up the other endings because I know basically what's going to lead up to them. If I have enough of the story that I don't need to go play through it again to get that part of the story, then I'll just watch the ending because I know what led up to it, No. I know what choice that I didn't make would have led to that ending.
Sure, and I understand. I don't begrudge you that. And yes, to answer, it's a difference of time.
Right.
When I was 12 years old, I had nothing to do and no responsibilities, so I could play a game 2-3 times through and do all 13 endings of Chrono Trigger in a New Game Plus. Versus nowadays, I'll just look it up, like as Sivo was saying. And sure, like I'm sorry that we're adults in a sense, or sometimes have to be. But you're right.
I'm sorry about that, too.
Yeah, it's a legitimate question.
I'm sorry that you're adults, too.
Yes, I apologize for that.
Says the oldest man in the room. The oldest, youngest man in the room.
But no, I mean, it's still legitimate. So, sure, if you're like 15 nowadays, and you want to do like a veteran playthrough of like the newest COD, you probably have the time and also the skill to do that. But nowadays, I just don't. I still like to challenge myself, I guess, to answer your question. So, yeah, a good example, I wanted to play Far Cry Primal for a while, and I didn't buy it new as I normally would have, so now it just dropped in price, just got it, and yeah, I bumped it up to hard. It's easy, normal, hard. Put it on hard, and I'm going to play through it on hard. But there's no other like extraneous things like attached to it, you know what I mean?
I think I'm going to get it and play through on permadeath.
Okay.
But I probably wouldn't be doing hard on that.
Can you change the difficulty level as you go, like so you can change it? See, that's a new thing.
Now that's a thing we're going to talk about.
That's a new thing. That's kind of what I wanted to bring up, is that they have recently started allowing you in games, like I think with Fallout 3 might have been the first game to do it. Or
no, other games have done it, but in the modern
I just don't
era,
remember it happening before that. But like you can actually change the difficulty level while you're in the middle of a playthrough.
Yes, which I think is good. Like it's more diverse in the sense that if I wanted to try, okay, I'm going to go through a hard playthrough.
Yeah,
it's just too hard. But I'm not forced to restart because of that. Yeah, it's a nice little convenient option they put in. Yeah, which again, I would say maybe the first tail end of the first Xbox's life, that generation. If you caught our episode about generations, but somewhere around there is all I'm saying, is when they started to that became an option.
Yeah,
that was included more and more.
And it still doesn't exist on like every game, but it's definitely
it's
there.
Way more prevalent than ever. And yes, I appreciate the fact that that's available to me. Again, like the Dragon Age thing, if I need it to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fairly recent game, and by recent I mean within the past decade. I forget the name of it.
Crash Bandicoot.
When you got I like Crash Bandicoot.
It's a
That
great
I
game.
think is
That's
beyond
more
the
than a
first
decade old.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Damn it.
So that
Go on.
yeah, when you died enough, it would ask you if you wanted to
change,
lower
yes.
the
I do
difficulty
remember that. Yeah.
in the most
Actually,
obnoxious, like
Other games did that too.
fuck you game.
Yeah.
I get this handled.
It's pandering to
It's
you.
there in Metal Gear Solid. Actually, there's if you fail a mission, I think it's 3 times. It asks you want to put the chicken hat on,
Yep.
which the chicken hat just makes everything easier. Like so, it's basically like lowers your difficulty level.
Yeah,
for
it's
that
almost like
mission.
an old Game Genie
yeah.
cheat thing that the game was like, hey, listen, you're fucking up
The
a
game,
lot.
yeah, the big game's like, hey, listen, we can make this easy for you. All you got to do is wear this stupid looking hat.
Yeah, and they're sort of like mocking you. Sure, like
Yeah.
it's a kind of a funny meta joke, but no, like other games did that too. It just slipped my mind, but there are certainly other examples when that was programmed into games where GTA did it. I believe that's what it was.
Mm.
Where if you failed the mission enough, they're like, hey, do you want to skip to the next part of the mission
Yeah,
and go to the story? Like, no, but thanks for asking, I guess. But sure, like I get it. Like, if you really did want to do that, it's nice that they included that.
yeah.
If you truly wanted to, and we're truly frustrated with it.
I've worn the chicken hat before.
I have not. I said no every time.
In life or in the game?
Both.
Both. Yeah,
Obviously.
of course.
But no, sure. Like
I'm not
it's-
proud.
It's just again, I guess it comes down to personal preference, and yes, whether or not you're a slave to achievements. Like I'll give you a really egregious example.
Which you two are, by the way.
I not to the degree Ian is, but I can be sure. But difficult.
I need my trophies.
If I'm going to do any, like, if the ones that I'm going to do the least or care about the least is going to be difficulty levels, I'll do like multiple story endings before I'll ever care about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah,
Sure.
that makes sense.
By the way, if I ever create a game, you're automatically going to get a trophy at the beginning of a thing called participant.
Okay, good. It's a perfect meta of evolution of it. But no, I mean, sure, like Evil Within, as well as we're going to talk about. Their Nightmare mode was one-hit kills, and like that's not specific to that game, but
Mhm.
that's just again insane to me. It's egregious. Again, yes, to your point earlier, E. If I was 12, maybe I would attempt something.
But it's
like that.
realistic.
Yeah, I guess if you're fighting monsters and zombies, but regardless of all that, it's just like a hardcore thing that it forces you to be perfect at that one game only just to do that, and that isn't what I'm interested in.
I
per
think
se.
if you're going to do something like that, you need to make it. You need to give a reason for it. You need to make it worthwhile
Yeah,
to actually finish doing
sure,
something
no,
like that.
I would agree.
And I feel like a lot of
Oftentimes
games.
it isn't.
I feel like a lot of games or a lot of developers don't understand that as they're making the game. They're like, "Oh, I'll just make it super hard, and then the most hardcore fans will just do it." And
Maybe they will. They probably will.
The
but
point is, well, I mean, the point of doing something like that is that you feel a sense of accomplishment at the end, and if you don't, then it's a waste
it's
of
completely
time.
pointless.
Yeah.
Sure.
Here's the thing.
Or
is-
even more pointless than it would have otherwise been.
Right.
I'm going to be a grouch here. So, you mentioned earlier that you guys don't have time to play games anymore, and I feel that a lot of developers understand that. So they make games easier, but they also are now producing more and more games.
Sure.
Mhm.
So sometimes they're creating games that aren't perfect, that don't have the necessary controls in order to have a perfect run. And if they include a hard mode that requires not only the skill of the player, but the system to be set up. Like for instance, I'm
No, I
playing
get it, yeah.
I'm playing Assassin's Creed Unity,
Mhm.
and that is buggy as hell to the point where like I'm playing on I don't think there's a difficulty levels there.
No, it's
But
not.
like I get stuck on a railing and I'm
that
trying
fucks
to
up your
jump
whole,
and I'm
mission.
chasing
Sure.
a person. And
Sure.
so if I was required to do a series of tasks in a perfect order, I couldn't just because of the game bugginess.
Itself,
I
yeah.
completely agree with that. You thought you were going to be grouchy, but that's a very valid point.
Yeah,
Like,
no, it definitely
the
is.
fact
for sure.
the fact that in order to beat something at the hardest difficulty level, the idea that you have to do a perfect run to do that means that you have to make that means that the game developers should be held to the same standard that the player is held to on a run like that. So if in order to do a perfect run, you have to make a perfect game that I can do a perfect run
Yes.
on, that I'm not going to like get, I'm not going to get bugged, run into a bug, or I'm not going to run into a part that's just pure luck. It's got to be all about you being skillful enough to do that perfect run.
So in
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed Unity, there is a co-op level called the Tournament, which
Gotcha.
is supposed to do in a team of 4, but most of the co-op missions you can solo by yourself. So the parkour aspect of this is so fucked up.
Yeah, it's
almost impossible to do solo. And
imprecise. If
so
you will,
I was looking up
sometimes.
how to do it solo online, and someone had a perfect comment that before any developer creates another Assassin's Creed game, they must be forced to beat this level solo in order to learn how not to do and to punish them prior to it.
Right.
So.
Right.
So somewhat similar to that. This is recent. Doom's coming out this Friday as of this recording, but as I recall, they had an article where the developers themselves could not get through permadeath mode.
Yeah, you told me about this.
Yeah, so sure, even if you can't do it, that's how do you expect players who didn't fucking make the game to go through it that way? So yeah, it just you got to strike a balance, sure, and I guess in general, what I would say is, I appreciate the fact that it's offered as an option if you want to take it and if it's there, and especially if you can turn it up and down at will throughout the game rather than being committed to one. That's fine too. And yes, those of us who are slaves, Jane Menzer, to trophies, then yes, you're going to be forced maybe to play through a mode that's frustratingly hard just to do that.
Not the only thing I'm a slave to.
Sure.
I think that
one of the many things you are a slave to.
But I think that with Doom, it's kind of like they needed something like that, something that was as hard as the nightmare mode of old. You know, like they needed something that was like incredibly impossible, and I guarantee somebody will beat it. Like some fan, will, somebody. Who
I wouldn't bet against that
is
either.
way too into the game is going to beat it.
Nah, you're right.
Even if the developers themselves can't beat it, there's somebody that's going to put way more time in it than even they did.
Look, the developers are busy people. They got lives. They're grown-ups. Let the young nerds go out and have a sense of self-identity by beating speedruns of Doom.
Yeah.
On the new school playgrounds, like, hey, I beat Doom on Nightmare in permadeath mode. I'm better than you. Sure.
I think Doom was one of those first games that had speedruns too, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And they still, people still do speedruns of Doom.
Sure.
And
I actually know a guy who still does it semi-professionally.
Yeah.
He's in the community that does speedruns.
Right.
So
sure. No, that's true. And you're right, Steve-O, to that point that, yes, they're trying to recapture the feel from the original for the reboot, if you will. And yeah, that's fine, because that was part of it ingrained in the original game.
Mm.
But just in general, too, again, like I was saying about all the other franchises that offer varying sliders, if you will, I appreciate it when it's there, and I'm probably, I'll almost always try it to start off with on the 3 out of 4 difficulty. And if it's too much, then it's too much. But often it isn't. And maybe that's sort of a sign of the hand-holding nature of games nowadays, in a sense.
Well, yeah, I think that's something that we haven't kind of fully fleshed out, is the fact that games nowadays, the difficulty level is a lot easier
it's toned down
than it was in old school games.
Absolutely.
But because they don't need to pad out the content.
Well, that's exactly what I was just going to say. It's not even... It is that, but I think that a big portion of it is the idea that you don't need to you can fill out a game with story as opposed to filling out a game with just
a difficulty wall,
making it hard to beat,
or action set pieces, or multiplayer, or whatever you want to fill out your game with.
Right. There are so many more options available to developers now than there were back in the day. When those, when Nintendo Hard was a thing,
exactly. No, that's all valid.
May I give my final thesis here? I mentioned kind of earlier that I like a good challenge in a game, and especially if you give me a trophy to go with that challenge. However, just make it fair. Test my skill and not my way to beat the broken game that you've given me.
Yeah.
And that happens far too often for me to you
don't feel
laugh it off. It's frustrating when I can't beat a game because the game's broken.
I completely agree. I think there's a lot of luck involved in playing the hardest difficulty levels a lot of times. You just need to walk into the situation or stumble into the right situation that allows you to beat it, which I think is kind of bullshit. That's a reason that I love the From Software games, because those games are all about skill.
Yeah.
They're all about being good enough to beat that section of the game to get to the next section. It's not about, just finding.
Not about randomness.
Yeah, it's not
if you
about
will.
finding this lucky part of like this lucky. The boss doesn't do the hardest thing that he does, and you're just gonna die no matter
Or
what. on
you
that
find the ledge which the boss can't attack you on,
Yeah.
part. right.
and you
Whatever
you
exploit
snipe one point
there
at
is,
a time
yeah.
to take out
Yeah.
the life. That's the kind of thing that really because that's not me beating the boss. That's me
Cheaping it.
taking a broken system,
Abusing
and
it.
yeah, abusing it.
Of course. Yeah, no, I agree with both that in large. Like, as I said, when done well, it will be a sense of accomplishment for you without having the frustration that comes along with it, just because it's, again, fake. Like, the difficulty wall, the spike is so huge that it's almost insurmountable.
Right.
So, again, when striking a good balance, and yes, like I said, I appreciate any developer who both includes it and realizes, like, knows how to utilize it correctly
Mhm.
to give me a satisfying experience of a game that maybe is a bit more challenging, but that's fine. That's kind of what I want, approaching a certain line. And then when that line is crossed, then fuck you.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's a. We talk about it as though it's like the most obvious thing in the world, but it's got to be such a difficult line to like play with
Sure, I know.
as a developer, especially since you're
I
developing.
certainly- yeah.
I would assume that they develop the game in order for it to be played in normal mode, and then they add on the more difficult levels later on. It's not like they're trying to balance the game for that. That's like, okay, if you want to
Yeah,
go
you're right.
nuts, then try this, and then they just add on whatever they think will make it more difficult, i.e., more hit points or more
Or whatever it
more
is,
damage or whatever, or you have less hit points or whatever it is. So. Yeah, we talk about it like, oh yeah, it's obvious what you should do to make
No.
difficulty like
A meaningful thing, sure.
yeah, exactly. But it's got to be such a hard thing to do because I don't know this for sure, but I feel like the hardest modes are always just kind of tacked on at the end of the game.
Right. Well, I mean, that you get the sense of that, and if not, I don't want to say it's lazy, but it's sort of easy to have that be the way your difficulty is going to
Well,
be.
I feel like sometimes like developers feel like they kind of just have to do that. Sorry,
Well,
Ian.
we're not talking about people here who are often making lifelong passion projects where they have
Yeah.
the time to add elements that you're dealing with either heartless
Like a
corporations
AAA mindset, yeah,
or
sure.
you're dealing with people who are sacrificing everything to develop a game. We watched a bunch of documentaries on game development
Right.
recently, and like, yeah, I can understand that balancing a normal game is probably incredibly difficult,
Mhm.
and then having to create an easy mode and a hard mode at the same time. Yeah, like they're probably going to look for the path of least resistance that gives a satisfactory thing without
Right.
them having
Yeah.
to retool their entire game. And I'm sympathetic with it. It just that's why I say I think the most important part is you just don't give us a broken product and then
Yeah.
expect us to do work magic with with it.
Sure, no, you're right, and yeah, I'll sort of tie it in that yes, when approaching that, it's probably more difficult than you think it is, but certainly it's a consideration for the devs. And if they do it well, then it will show through in their game. It won't be a broken game. It'll be a test of skill, as we said, which I think is the most important part. But I'll bring up one more thing, which I think is kind of funny, that they sort of, at least at Wolfenstein, the newest one, the New Order,
Mhm.
there were, as you were saying, as we started off with, yes, they had the old school like difficulty selector, but the avatar, Blazkowicz, if you put it on like, very easy, he'd have like a baby, like a pacifier in his mouth and like a baby bid, and like as you turned it up, he would get like more intense face and like covered in blood. It was like the final one. It's nice little like meta content. They're always like mocking you.
Yeah, well, they
but
always
it's
did
a
that.
funny little joke.
They always did that with the old school like Wolfenstein game and Doom as well.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the more hardcore you played, like the more hardcore
Sure.
your character looked, you know.
And yeah, sure. So again, it speaks to your psychological mindset. Like, oh, I don't want to play with a bit. You know, it makes you feel emasculated in a sense, or it just makes you feel lesser.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still kind of funny. But all I'm saying is, I agree with everything we just said. That when done well, when the devs think about this as when they're building their game, it will show in the final product, and it will make you as a player feel satisfied for overcoming, you know, the X+1 difficulty level or whatever it may be.
Right. Completely agree.
Sure. So I think until then, my difficulty level will be set to hard, although not very hard. I'm Scott Thurlow, joined by Ian Manzer
I don't have any quarters left to give.
and Stephen Amosi.
I did this podcast on normal difficulty.
And you can play this one on Nightmare if you so choose. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one.
Good night. This has been Syntax Error. Thank you as always for listening, and we will see you next time.
Music by Stephen Ormosi. Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow.
Syntax Error is part of a Lost Signals Productions. All rights reserved.